Welcome, everybody. We are back. PX Lip is joining me, as he often does.
I keep showing up and you keep just taking my stream, and I don't understand.
Yes. Cool, cool, cool. So we hope everyone is having a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, or night, depending on your place around the world or your sleep schedule. It is evening for us, and we are back. Um, Not sure there was. I'm trying to think of out there, and if yes, the cat is
Yep, there's a
joining us
cat.
as well.
The cat is making the
The cat
usual guest appearance
the cat is back. Uh,
the very next
so
day.
I've had a bit of a busy week with the esports facility that we opened for the public on Monday.
So
Uh,
you guys had your first event on Tuesday, right?
well, so the uh, so the esports facility is divided into an area that's set aside for varsity competition. You know, the
Mm-hmm.
teams that compete officially for the university, and a lounge area. And the lounge area is now open starting at 2 o'clock in the afternoon through either 8 or 10, depending on the on the day. The that lounge area is also available for academic use in the morning, and so ultimately we expect people to schedule classes or demonstrations or things of that nature in the mornings. But Monday was the first day we were open for business officially, and so students could come in and just basically sit down and play games. So that was really cool. We reached capacity by 5 o'clock. Had just a lot of people there, so that was really cool. And then, as you were saying, we started competitions against other universities in this fall. We have a Valorant team and a Rocket League team. And Valorant plays on Tuesday nights and Rocket League on Wednesday nights. And our team comes into our facility. We turn the lounge computers off, but not we don't turn them off, but we disable the login. So people can come in if they want to spectate, but the lounge itself is disabled. The computers are the logins to the computers are disabled, so we don't disturb the gameplay. So I think the teams enjoy playing in the space, which is really cool. The current mode of operation for the league is that each team competes from its home facility, so the opposing team is not actually on site. Some of that is COVID related, of course. Some of this is cost related, of not trucking teams all over the place when that's not really super necessary given the types of games they're playing. But we certainly are set up. We could have a full-fledged competition. We have enough computers for both teams. But so our teams are in our facility, and I think really enjoying doing that. We had a full student production crew basically practicing um, streaming the games, which will start either next week or week after next, depending on how ready they feel.
Hmm.
I think one of the groups, the ones that are streaming Valorant, I think they may be ready next week. Um, the group that's streaming Rocket League might need a little bit more practice before they go live, but we're expecting that will happen soon. So it'll be good fun. But it was really interesting. Some of the students staffing the broadcast booth had been working with us over the summer, so we're pretty familiar with the facility. But some of them were basically what in American football we call walk-ons. I mean, they literally walked into the facility, said, "Oh, that looks cool. Can I help?" And we said, "Sure." And so some of them basically had never seen the control space before, and were just kind of doing what they needed to do. It was really cool. I only had a chance to look at a little bit of the recording so far, but I think they're doing an okay job.
Yeah, so I think I maybe watched 5 minutes of it. But yeah, there were a couple of odds and ends I would call out. I was
Yeah,
meaning to send you a message with some
yeah,
thoughts, but
yeah. And
I'm
we've
sure you
had
caught them too. Their audio, they have some audio cleanup they need
right
to figure
there,
out.
right. And the mics we have are high quality mics, but they didn't come with either the foam or screen pop filters. I don't know why those don't ship with that, but they don't, so we have to go
And you
procure
need them.
them. We do need
Yep.
them,
That was actually my first note.
right? And
You
you know,
the,
we
the
could, we
one of
could,
your
yeah,
one
we
of your
could,
commentators has a
yeah,
very strong breath.
yeah, we could configure a pop filter in the software, but
Sure.
it's probably just better to have a physical barrier. It makes, I mean, most people do that anyways, and I'm just kind of surprised that those microphones didn't automatically come with something like that, but they didn't, so
Yeah.
we'll have to get
Hmm.
that. I suspect our local music store in town will probably sell those.
No, right. They're cheap, but
If push came to shove, we'd probably just walk into a music store and buy a couple
yeah.
of them. But all in all, I think one of the students managed to put together a highlight reel during the match, and run that at the end of the broadcast, well, the pseudo broadcast. So yeah, it's really good stuff. I mean, I was really proud of them. And we need to polish some graphics, and the on-screen talent probably needs a little bit more. Ultimately, needs a bit more coaching. I think there was some dead air in between rounds and that sort of thing. So those are all things you have to learn. And it's not my area of expertise, but I have a bunch of colleagues who do know how to do that and teach that. So I'm going to start pulling them in to see if they can help the students out. But all in all, I'm really thrilled to actually see the facility in operation. And we had basically an event to the university has an advisory group that works with our IT organization with respect to basic technology and learning spaces. And so we had that group both physically and some online in the facility for a meeting on Wednesday. So that was really cool. So, but it made for a busy week. But but a really exciting one, because it's been arguably between 4 and 5 years in the making to get this facility up and running. I've only been involved in it for maybe a year and a half, but it seems like that time has just dragged on and on and on with delivery delays and just all sorts of things.
Sure.
I was in there today, just basically finishing up some documentation work and toning out video links, because we finally, not towards the end of the summer, finally got some more of the cabling installed between our video switching gear and the PCs, and so some of that on the PC side hadn't been configured yet, and nothing had been documented as far as what goes where, and nothing had been labeled, and so just lots of little things. I was working that today, but it's just super exciting. But that's kind of occupied my week quite a bit. What about you? Anything interesting to talk about, or just same old, same old?
It's been a lot of the same old, same old. No, I mean, I'm still on infrastructure shenanigans, trying to get. And I spent the afternoon trying to pull all of our resident infrastructure into Terraform so that can track it, but that's not particularly exciting. And we've already shown off Terraform,
I was
so
gonna say
nothing new
that
there.
was so if anybody's here didn't see that, go back and take a look at our stream on Terraform. I think I even have that up on YouTube. I'm not sure. If I don't,
Oh,
it'll be up
fancy.
there soon. But yeah, that was a good one. All right.
Yeah, it was neat.
Yeah, no, I was that was exciting. So speaking of exciting, one of the things that I thought would be fun for us to look at is the NASA released some more images from James Webb, and this is the one that sort of caught my attention. But there are others, and I'll go back to the album here in a second. PX Lip always makes fun of me because I go to their Flickr album instead of the NASA site.
It's not that I make fun of you. It's just, it's not, it's like, it is not, in my brain, it doesn't make sense. And I cannot tell you why, but it makes perfect sense. it just doesn't to me, and I'll leave it
Oh,
at that.
I
Yeah,
hear
it's
I
it's
hear you.
weird.
I hear you. So, by the way, this is sort of a sign of the times. So, um, a banner on Flickr caught my attention. A new content category for uploads and filtering is here: virtual photography. And I said, well, what is virtual photography? And I initially thought it was something different, but for them, virtual photography means basic screenshots taken in game engines, simulations, things like Second Life, if anybody's still using that. Um, there's a term that I can't ever even pronounce. Um, machinima,
Ex
uh,
machina and machinima. That's
machinima.
machinima, right? Because that's a weird,
Yeah,
awkward. Is it a portmanteau? Because machina is a word of
yeah.
Latin, but
So I've seen this
machinima.
before, and
Hmm.
and it only and but the only reason I knew of that particular terminology is kind of a long time ago. I was working on some virtual world simulations, um, and oh hi ODG, welcome, and there was an artist working at OU at the time who's no longer here, who
Oh,
was creating uh, art by creating virtual, basic tableaus in a virtual world, and then taking screenshots of them. And he referred to that term machinima, if that's what I would said. I really don't know,
I'm guessing. I'm
but
guessing, but
anyway,
makes
so
sense to me.
so I mean, totally unrelated to this, but I was saying, what on earth is that? Um, what I thought it was, and that'll be something we'll talk at more length in a future stream. There's been quite a bit of talk about AI generated art, which I thought
Hmm.
was what they were talking about. They're not. This is much more straightforward. You build an environment in a game engine and take a screenshot of it. Is that now photography? And so on Flickr, you now have a new category, so you can label it as virtual photography, which I guess is the best we can come up with.
Yeah.
Um, and so ODG and company have Red Eye. Gemix, welcome, welcome. Glad
Yeah,
to have you
I
here.
got my commands flipped red eye. It made me laugh too.
Uh, no, okay,
Like I say,
grand, yeah,
I have a special command for ODG.
right,
Apparently, my brain didn't want to use it because
yeah,
I typed SO instead of ODG, but that's
right,
okay.
right. Well, welcome everyone. And if you're coming from on the ODG rate, I don't have to tell you, but for anyone who watches this later or anyone who's here who hasn't is not aware of Old Depressed Gamers channel, as I always do, recommend his channel highly. He streams on Thursdays but he streams multiple times a week, so worthwhile checking out. He streams usually right before we do on Thursdays, which is why he's kind enough to drop in and will hang out with me afterwards. But his channel does cover some IT topics. He does gaming, Flight Simulator, Star Citizen, those kinds of things. But his channel is also a wonderful resource for mental health issues, and so well worth checking out. All right, so what caught my eye, other than this business about virtual photography, was this image that showed up in that showed up in NASA's Flickr album, and probably I'm sure on their website as well. Um, but it is arguably probably I don't know if it's the first time that's ever been done. James Webb does not discover this exoplanet. It was discovered in an exoplanet search mission some time ago using a terrestrial, ground-based telescope. But my guess is that they could not actually get an image of the planet. These are images of an actual exoplanet. The star is HIP 65426, prosaically named, and the planet is 65 HIP 65426b. So presumably it's as far as we know. I think the nomenclature is labeling by orbit from closest to the star out. Is that right? Is that your understanding too?
Sorry, say that one more time.
So B would be the second planet we know of coming from the star. So A
Yes,
would be the
that would
closest
be
one. B
correct.
would be the second closest.
That would be my understanding. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I thought too. I think that's the nomenclature. So I guess Earth would be Sol
C.
C or D?
C.
C.
Venus and Mercury. Right?
Venus, Mercury, right? Mars is outside of us. D would be Mars, right?
Yep.
So.
See if I can do it in my head still. All 8. Nope.
ODG, actually, that is not entirely accurate. We are using OBS 28. There is PXSlip was clever enough to find a development branch?
There's essentially an RC or an alpha release of the
right.
OBS 28. It's not. So, okay, we'll dive into this really fast.
Yeah, let's do that.
The mainline OBS NDI plugin is, you're absolutely correct, not supported, does not work. There is and I should be really specific. You have to go and grab a very specific tagged release. So basically, it looks to me, and I only had about 5 minutes to look at the Git repository, but it looks to me like the original developer may have either run out of time or gotten distracted, which software developers, we do that. There's another developer who looks like they are taking the lead on. There's a pull request basically sitting open to update. They are doing a pretty major refactor. Yeah. Oh yeah. It's why a streamer I watched ripped out Streamlabs was just getting their chatbot's just messy. I keep promising I'll develop a bot for them, and it's just a lot of work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So thanks to PXSlip sleuthing, we were able to find an alpha release, pre-release version that we're both running, and that seems to be working. For the record.
Yeah. For anybody that well, to some degree, we should probably caveat that slightly. To anybody who is watching this and using the NDI plugin and is probably in the last quarter of 2022, because they'll probably fix it. Oh yeah, I mean, I'll get to that message in a second. The alpha release of the new OBS NDI plugin does not support exporting individual sources as NDI sources. You can still export a composite scene as an NDI source, but you cannot output an individual source, which we had been doing.
Right.
It actually sounds like they're not going to bring that back in its current incarnation. I think it sounds like they'll bring the functionality back, just in a different way. But yeah, it sounds like there's a pretty major refactor happening on the NDI plugin, so it might be a little bit of time before that's ready. So if you are in 2023, I would go check. They might have released the new version, but no promises. To your comment, I'm intrigued why. I'm intrigued why it broke everything. It shouldn't have. OBS WebSockets is now just integrated into OBS. I'm curious why that. I'm curious why that broke everything, but different set of communication protocols, maybe. I don't know. Doesn't matter. Interesting.
Yeah. So I had to update the my Stream Deck plugin, the Elgato plugin, but that they have an OBS 28 compatible version.
That makes sense, ODG. I didn't realize. I read the version number and it didn't occur to me that yes, OBS WebSocket has released V5, which was a major rewrite breaking compatibility. And Streamlabs bot. The other reason that I don't recommend Streamlabs bot is because they don't really update the functionality outside of the bot itself. So it's got a lot of old archaic stuff. I think it was running on like Python 2.5 still,
wow.
and they hadn't updated it and they had no real plans to update it. So
Yeah, so
yeah, makes sense.
that was a thing. But yeah,
Yeah,
thanks for the heads up. We ran into that, but unfortunately, I mean, knock on wood, the albeit with less functionality in some ways, the if you recall when we kind of went a fairly circuitous route when we first used NDI because there was a level mismatch that we had to work through. They must have they must have done something because now PXLip's feed comes over to me. I had to put a slight boost into it, but very limited.
but I think
Uh,
when we first tried it, right, you were putting like
I had to put
20, 25 decibels or something like that on it.
more than that. Yeah.
Yeah,
So they must have cleaned up some stuff around the audio level mismatch that used to exist between NDI and OBS. So that's good, and arguably that's what allowed us to just kind of bypass OBS on PXLip side and just pull up a webcam source basically from and a screen source from PXLip side. So far so good. I like the look and feel of OBS 28. I mean, it looks a lot cleaner and more modern. Um, uh,
yeah. So ODG, that's what I was talking about. Yeah, it's running on this archaic version of Python.
right.
And was part of the reason that we helped the streamer get off of it. We replaced almost everything. No, that's a lie. We replaced everything. It's just right now this bizarre hodgepodge of bits and pieces that really should be cleaned up into one thing.
A lot of different mini bots.
Yes. Well, because well, so
Since
to
we're
the
on the
point
topic,
that yeah, so we'll keep talking about it. The one major piece of functionality that we had to rebuild for them was they used they had tied a bot command to deactivating Firebot. Interesting. Okay, I'll have to look at that. The streamer had tied a particular chat command to activating an OBS source for a given period of time, which isn't particularly difficult, but obviously you need to wire a couple of pieces together, mostly being yeah. So that's and yeah. So the yeah. So that was a fun little piece of tech to rebuild somewhere. So I threw up like a few like 20 lines of JavaScript on a web page somewhere that hooks into OBS WebSockets, pulls the list of sources and lets you set it up. So
yeah,
it's just very specific to that streamer. I keep meaning to
yeah,
make it like slightly more generic.
yep. So
Yep.
that was a thing, but yeah. So again, thanks for the heads up. Fortunately, we were able to manage to deal with that without having to revert back to an
Yeah.
older OBS version. I said I like the OBS version I'm running now. The 28 looks good, feels good. It interacts with the Stream Deck a little bit differently, and I think the thing that's in a way that's a little bit more logical is I tend to run OBS in studio mode, and the Stream Deck it seems to now consistently stage um, rather than in the previous version it would jump directly to the active stream if I asked for a scene, and it seems to now be more consistent in loading. When I hit a button on the Stream Deck, it loads into the preview, which is what it really should have done all along. So there's some really good things. All right, just a little bit of a wrap up here. So so the and I won't scroll through them. I mean, you can go to the Flickr site or to NASA's site and pull this image up. There's a nice long description. This is a gas giant. So this is a planet sort of equivalent to Jupiter. It was been photographed in, as we've seen in other instances of James Webb. They use 4 different channels. So they use NIRCam with two different filters, and MIRI with 2 different filters. So we've got 4 different wavelengths. As they pointed out, there's a sort of weird bars next to the central image. Here are artifacts of they're basically diffraction patterns. So those aren't real. They're I mean, this is a very, very small object, and so those are artifacts of the imagers
on a stellar scale, at least.
Yeah. Well, no. I mean, in terms of how many pixels it takes up in the in the image.
No, I just you described what was essentially something the size of Jupiter as very small, and it made me chuckle.
Right. Yeah. Yes. On the scale of things. So I think people who know more about this, and I suspect they probably also pulled spectra, so we probably actually know something about the composition of at least the atmosphere of that exoplanet, which is kind of cool. And of course, you can see the main image above the breakouts is actually not a James Webb image. That is a standardized sky survey image. So it's a composite of a whole bunch of different things, I think. That's the star that was known, and it was known to have a planet. So in these images, you see the actual star symbol in these little inserts. That's where the star would be if its light hadn't been blocked by one of the photo mechanisms inside the telescope. And even then, there's a little quote from the researcher in the description. Even then, when they initially pulled these images up, there was still a lot of the starlight blocking the image. They had to do some more image processing to pull this out, which I think is pretty cool. So yeah, so this is this is an actual picture, even though, and especially in MIRI, it's only a few pixels across, but it is a picture of an exoplanet, which I think, just if you think about it, is pretty darn fun. That's pretty amazing to me. So I thought that was worth spending a little bit of time on. And if you go back to the album, I think Pixlip, you mentioned, I think there's a. So this is this is the Tarantula Nebula.
Yeah, stellar nursery. I mean, most nebulas are, but this one in particular, I think they were studying for. They're talking about, you can see at the center a pretty dense cluster of new stars.
Right there.
Obviously, some foreground stars, but yeah, it's a stellar nursery. Stars are being born there. And all that gas will eventually gravitationally smoosh. It probably does.
This is the NIRCam image. That's what I was looking for.
I'm looking at the NIRCam as well. Yep.
Yeah.
This
is the NIRCam image. So this is near infrared, and I suspect there's several images of this nebula.
There's a what I saw is there's a NIRCam image, a MIRI, and then I think a
probably composite like they usually do. Yeah. So cool stuff. I mean, it just it's kind of fun to see more of this stuff come out. I like it. It's good to see. All right. So I mean, it just aside from being scientifically amazing, it is also just absolutely just plain gorgeous. All right, so this is the point in the stream where the students in my class are going to join the VOD, I think. because I have chapter markers. So as you recall, we've been working on this network for some time now, and we're going to do some more of that. And these are, what I'm doing here is always sort of a precursor to the assignment my students then do the following week, and so the VOD from this stream becomes one of the resources for them. So welcome students in my class. If you're watching this, probably not live, but if after the fact, there may be some of maybe here live. But there's the part that relates to the class. And I should also say, I'm sort of recovering from a small surgical procedure. So at some point, if I get too tired, I'm just going to maybe call a little earlier than usual. But I'm okay right now. But I may just get a little fatigued still. So if that happens, I'll kind of drop out a little bit early.
I feel your pain, Red Eye. I feel your pain.
Yes. Yeah. So if you were here or watched the previous video, so you remember, and of course in my network I haven't actually configured everything, so I have to be kind of careful to see which pieces are actually there and which ones aren't. But you remember, we basically gave these routers some both IPv4 and IPv6 addresses, and kind of made sure that we can actually get packets back and forth between them. And on the IPv4 side, we kind of went into, I think this guy is configured. Let me bring up its console. So I think we gave this guy an address. And indeed we did. So we told, we gave it let's see. Okay, so this this is basically I'll say a few things about it because I went through a mighty struggle to see if it could be done. I'm probably not going to actually do it this way, but this thing here that's brought up that GNS3, the simulation engine, calls an IPTerm. It's really just a container with a Debian Linux Debian release. Which makes a ton of sense. But what I want to do today is we want to get this router here, VyOS 1 in this case. We want to set it up so that it hands out IPv4 addresses automatically, like you would expect in most networks, right? Thanks for the well wishes, guys. Appreciate that. So normally when we, in most corporate networks, home networks, whatever, we set it up so that when we bring up a new computer, plug it into the wired network or bring it up wirelessly, it just gets the configuration information it needs. And that's done with the DHCP server, Dynamic Host Control Protocol. And that's, we want to configure that the VyOS routers at the edges, and I'm not going to do all of them, I'm just going to do the one on the left. And we want to configure these guys to do that. And most routers can have the software to do that. And so I say, okay, we've got this Debian release in a container, perfect. We'll just use this as our test subject, so to speak. And then I realized it doesn't have a DHCP client. Whoever built the container didn't add a DHCP client. So okay. How do I do that? Well, of course, this network here is isolated, so I can't install anything on there. So I said, well, what if I went and just take these guys here, move them over a little bit, if I can. There we go. I didn't mean to grab you. You go back there. So I said, well, no problem. There's basically a network address translator object in GNS3, and so I can connect to that and get get a DHCP client. Well, not so fast. This NAT object doesn't tell me anything about the addresses it uses. So I used one of the. So GNS3 has this built, and this is, I think, the device I'm going to end up using, certainly tonight, and probably even for my students. So GNS3 has this weird device that they call a VPC, and it is a very old GitHub GitHub project. Developed strictly for GNS3. It's built in. It's not a container or anything like that. It's built into the software. It's not an operating system that you would recognize from anywhere. It just basically is a network probe. It can do pings and trace routes, and it can assign itself an address. And most importantly, it can do DHCP. And I think if I type show, it tells me that it has an address, and that address that address is what I need. So I know now that this weird NAT object uses 192.168.22 as its network. The router, just my most home router, assigns itself the .1 address. Okay, so that all works. So I said, okay, now I know the parameters of this thing, so maybe I can make this work. Well, not so fast. So I go
It's never that easy.
Yeah,
Is it?
so I go in here. I'll bring this guy's console up, and I think I should still have a callback buffer. Right, so what I want to do is, so I've connected this guy up. Remember, it doesn't have DHCP, so I give it an address. So I've manually assigned an address to this container, and I said, okay, that's cool. I can ping an external address. Sure, if I can, cool. Oh, wait a minute. If I try to do an apt install, I'm going to need DNS. Bummer. So I ended up having to look up how to manually edit resolve.conf, which I haven't done in ages.
Oh,
But
God.
resolve.conf is a configuration file in Debian Linux that, among other things, specifies a name server. So I put that in. Now I can actually resolve names. And by the way, what the entry you see there is not the one I put in. And that's because I put in 8.8.8.8, the Google name server. At that point, and I don't know why it was terribly slow, but that I don't understand totally. But at that point, I was able to ultimately do. Let's see where it is. There it is. I needed to find the name of the package, and the DH client is part of ISC DHCP client. At least that's a Debian package. And so I was eventually able to install that. I don't know if that actually installs a man page. Nope. Does it have help? It may just run. It has a -H. Cool. So basically, just run the thing, and it has a whole bunch of defaults. Their configuration files and such. But basically, I just ran DH client, and it talked to the server. As you saw earlier, it actually overwrote my resolve.conf with a new one. Put the name server in there, gave itself an address. So I was able to get this to work, but boy, that was not the easiest thing in the world. So I may not want to do it that way, as far as my students are concerned. Now, this weird guy here, still have him up? No, that's not it. This guy here. This guy here, basically just if you look IP question mark. So you can do it can do a it can basically ask for a DNS, and it can renew, it can release, and so we should be able to do something like this. I should be able to do a DHCP -X, which should remove the current address, and then I want to let's see what it does if I tell it to actually show me the packets. Yeah, there it goes. Cool. So the way DHCP works, I'm not sure why I did it twice, to be honest with you. That's not what I expected. Oh no, it did. No. No, that's I always get confused. So let me enlarge this a bit. So the original DHCP protocol is really weird because it's glued on top of an old protocol called bootp, which is basically a protocol for network booting diskless workstations. And so there's an opcode that says this is a request or reply, and then there's an option that tells you what type of DHCP message it is. And so basically it goes and says, I want to find out if there are DHCP servers. That's called the discover packet. The DHCP server answers, or should answer, and this is what we expect when we set up our own, that says, yes, here I am. If you accept, I'll give you this IP address, and this would be the default gateway, default route, and a DNS server. And so then the client turns around and says, yes, I would like that IP address. And it gets the acknowledgement back that basically says, okay, you're all set, here's your address. And so 122.205 should be this guy's address, and if we look at it, that's what he has. All right, so relatively straightforward. So I think rather than going through all of the pain of connecting the containers, the IPTerm Linux containers to the outside world, and then go through all the trouble of setting up manually setting up DNS, getting the ODG. I think this one is, I think it just stands for virtual PC. I like virtual private computer, but I think this stands for So maybe you're right. So virtual PC, basically it's just a tool built into GNS3, but it's kind of a useful one. So what we want to do is have the router act as a DHCP server. And it's not really terribly difficult to do, but obviously all the stuff that all the information the router produces has to be, the DHCP server produces, has to be coded in there somehow, right? So it's going to take a little bit of tinkering to get that to work. All right, so I'm going to close this one out so I don't confuse myself. We will, while we're at it, grab one of these virtual PCs and connect it to our switch here, and we'll start it. Undo that. We'll start that VPC just so we have it available once there's actually a DHCP server running on the router. So let me move this a little bit so it doesn't obscure the network I'm trying to use, because I'll need that in a moment. So let's bring up a console for this router, because that's who we need to work with. And then I'll need to bring up the documentation, because this is not something I do enough to memorize it. All right. So we'll definitely want to go into configure mode. We know that much. Okay. And so let me bring up my documentation here. And if anyone ends up working on the VyOS operating system, of all the various open source projects I worked with over the years, this is one of the nicer ones as far as documentation. It's really pretty well organized. You can go, there's a service section, and a DHCP service are one of the services that the router operating system can provide. And so, as I went to that section, I've got to go all the way to the front again. And so I can set I can create what I need to do, and this is sort of a little bit theory of operation. DHCP servers, I've had what was it? Some of you may remember a while back I was playing around with the RenPy game engine. Their documentation drives me absolutely to drinking. It is so poorly organized, you can't find anything. It jumps from an overview that is so high level to be almost useless directly to how to modify the underlying code in the game engine. It's like, no, I want the intermediate stuff. It's really, really weird, and it's kind of hard to follow. Right, so DHCP servers by design can serve many different networks, and so the first thing I do is I need to establish not just that I want a DHCP server, but I need to establish some sort of a token, some sort of a name, so it can group all the configuration parameters together that go with a DHCP server. And so you notice here all of the commands start with set service DHCP server, shared network name something. And so let's see if I can. Go ahead.
I was just say, let's be honest, ODG. Are any of us really good about writing docs? We're in this industry to write tools, not the documentation.
Yeah, and I beat on my students because I've been through the process way too often with a student graduating. I realized they did something really cool, and I have no idea how it works, and they left no notes behind as to how it works, and it's really frustrating. So what I don't know...
that sounds about right. I just said that sounds about right.
Yeah. So what I don't know, but I'm going to just try, is I think I can jump into like that subcategory. So let's see if it'll let me do that. All right, so I would do something like edit service DHCP server shared network name. I called it left because it's the leftmost network on my screen. Okay, cool. So this is something I really, really like about VyOS. And again, it's a derivative, or maybe I don't know which one's a derivative of which one, but it is functionally super similar to JWST, the Juniper operating system. I like this a lot because you notice from the documentation the command strings are getting really long, and if you have to type them all the time, it's a real pain. In fact, a lot of people have what they call recipes. They have like a text document on their desktop that has all these commands written out, and they just copy and paste them because they're just such a pain to type. But you can type a portion of the command instead of set. You use the edit keyword, and it drops you into that sort of almost like a subsystem. And so now everything I type refers to that network, which is kind of cool, right? So I can avoid having to type, service DHCP server shared network name left every time. It assumes that now until I exit out of that. All right, so having said that, let's hop over here. So I don't much care for domain name and domain search, although they sometimes can be useful. But I do need to produce a name server for the device to use. And while home routers happily use themselves because they usually have a DNS forwarder, I don't have a DNS forwarder set up yet. So we will impose on Google. And not that it matters, right? Because this network is isolated. So I will put a name server in there, but it doesn't matter because the network really can't go anywhere until. So in fact, I might just give it a bogus address, just because ultimately we have to run our own name server in here. So I do want to put it in, but I'm just going to give it an address that right now is not reachable. Well, I might put in the Google address for now. We'll change that later. Trying to decide what I want to do here. I think I'm going to use the router itself, because ultimately I'm going to set up a DNS forwarder, so that makes the most sense, and then I can put the server anywhere I want and forward it through the router, which is what we typically do. All right, so we'll do it that way. So I should be able to set the name server to the router's address. So let's do that. Now by my convention, I always put the routers on the last usable address of the network. So I should be able to do something like this. Set name server to 10.0.8.254, which is the router address. Okay. Now, what else do we need to set? So this is kind of cool in some ways. I can tell the DHCP server to check for rogue devices before it uses an address. And I'm not going to set that up here, but it is kind of cool to have. So if I enable ping check, basically the DHCP server is supposed to be the authoritative device managing all addresses on the network, all dynamically assigned addresses. That does not preclude some user or even administrator accidentally manually configuring a device that uses one of the addresses that the DHCP server is supposed to manage. If you do that, all sorts of bad things happen. The DHCP client at the client device is supposed to check as well, but it's certainly in some instances certainly worthwhile having the server double check that basically sending out a ping saying is that let's make sure nobody answers on that address before I use it. So I'm not going to set that up, but it is useful. So yeah, I don't need a listen address. Yeah, so I think a lot of organizations will set this particular option. I can tell this DHCP server that it is supposed to be authoritative. Since the request, the original So it is, again, this is in especially in like universities, for example, it is very common for someone to bring a little router or something like that into the like their dorm room or what have you, or their office, and then plug it in the wrong way, and all of a sudden you have a device that tries to hand out addresses when it sees DHCP discover requests. Since those are broadcasts, the real DHCP server can see them and basically tell the client who's asking, don't listen to this other device. It doesn't always work, but it is at least somewhat of a protection against that. So probably makes sense to do that. So let's do that. So we set it to authoritative. What else? Okay, now I can so there it's is interesting. There's a we already configured a DNS server overall, so we're saying we're going to use that for all address blocks. But what if I wanted to use different DNS servers for different subnets? I can different subnet blocks, and so I can configure the name server at the subnet level, or I can configure it at the at the global level, which is what I did. All right, so we will want to now everything else we're going to do here is going to be at the subnet level, so let's do that. So let's see if we can do this. Edit subnet, and it's going to have to be 10.0.8.0/24, I think. Yep. Okay, so we're now telling the server that it is supposed to, everything else I configure here applies only to that subnet. So I need to specify a default router, right? So that the device that we're configuring is knows what default route to configure. So we're going to say set default router to 10.0.8.254. Okay. Now, what else do we need to do? So that's my default router. We've already done the name server. I'll leave the least time at default. That's how long the address is valid for the client. The default is a day, which is fine. I don't care. We have to tell the server what addresses it's allowed to hand out. It's not obviously not the entire subnet. It doesn't have to be. So we need to tell it what address to start and what address to end. So let's do that. Range. Wasn't it range? Let's see. Whoops. What's the syntax here? Set range. Oh, we need to give it a number and then the start and the stop. Okay. Set range 0. Start. Let's see. Well, let's say we wanted to start at 10.0.8.100, and well, I think the opposite is stop. We'll set it to 150. Yep. All right. So what we just did here is we said the addresses you're allowed to use start at 100, stop at 150. I could tell it I want to exclude an address. So for some bizarre reason, this would be really a bad practice. But I could say, well, I've already manually assigned an address in the middle of that range, so I don't want you to hand that out. That I think is really bad practice. But so we're not going to do that. But you could. And that's maybe all we need. I think that should give us. There are some other things here. Obviously, I can do the ping check at the subnet level. I can have a failover, meaning that there's a second DHCP server that can take over in the case of failure. But I would have to send my lease information to that. All right. So let's see if this is going to work. So I want to exit. I want to exit out of this level.
Excuse me.
I think I can show configuration here. Nope. I need to do it this way. No, I can't do that. Let's see. What can I do here? Oh, it's just show. Okay, so that's there we go. There's our DHCP server. So let's see if that agrees with what we want. So it says that network name left. It's authoritative. There's a name server. The default router for the subnet, starting at 100, ending at 150. Cool. So I need to commit that. Things have been really slow today. This is running on in a shared environment, so there must be another class that has a project due. We're running, I think, over 150 of the something like over 100 of these instances in our VMware infrastructure for a range of different classes, and I suspect there's another class that has a project due shortly. Because it looks like things are busy. Okay, so it should have committed that. So now, if we've practiced really clean living, we should be able to go to this virtual PC and tell it we want to do DHCP. It's going to send a discover, send another discover. That's got, okay, there's a request. There's the ACK. Cool. So our server built in the router did what we wanted it to do. This is the offer, okay. So in the offer and then the repeat in the request, it offered 10.0.8.100, which is the first address in the range. That makes sense. It tells it where the server is, and it should tell it where the gateway is. I don't see that. Oh, there it is. Router. There's the router address in the ACK. Okay, so there's the router address. So that means that we should. I'm just going to try. I'm just going to ping something that I think that one. I think that one over there is safe. I think we configured all the way over to VyOS 4. So let's see if we did. And this is 10.0.0. Let's look. Let's see if 10 will respond. Yep. Okay. So what we've accomplished here. What we've accomplished here is we have set up our DHCP server on the router, given it some basic information, and it happily handed it out to our client. So that was about as smooth as things could have gone.
Can't argue with that.
So I'm trying to decide whether I should just wrap it here or try to do something else. Just to sort of look ahead. There's a couple of things that are sort of worthwhile looking at. The Actually, one thing I'm sort of curious about. Did I give this? Well, we did that. Let's see. That's the PC. There's VyOS. All right, so we'll save this configuration because it seems to actually work. Exit from here. Okay. Right. So one thing I'm curious about. Right, so you might wonder, if you're so inclined, how this works in IPv6. Because in IPv6, I'd prefer not to manage addresses centrally. I've got tons of them, and there are mechanisms for machines to assign their own IP addresses. Now, whether this little virtual PC is capable of doing that or not, I do not know. But I'm kind of curious if I did that. Kind of curious if that actually would work. Let's see. In the documentation, oh, there it is. Router advertisements. How does that work? Let's give that a try. I'm quite curious if it's that simple. That's a worthwhile thing to do before we sign off. All right. So the idea is that if I give this router an IPv6 address on the interface that goes out to this network, and I need to pick one, I can then set router advertisements, and it will tell everyone else that it exists, and the attached devices should automatically end up with valid IPv6 addresses. Well, let's see if that actually works. And I have no idea. I mean, that's supposed to be built into something like Linux, so that I don't know if that little VPC can do it, but the Linux machine should do that without my having to configure anything. So let's try that, but I'm going to have to take a look and see what I did. So I know we set up a couple of these routers with I'm almost certain I set this guy up with so I did our unique prefix, and I think I used basically sort of ::1. I'm going to use ::2 and so on for the router connections. Okay. So I'm making this stuff up as I go, which is always dangerous, but hey. Let's copy that because I don't want to type this. All right, so this one's sort of not relevant, but I want to go to my VyOS 1 router. that one. And let's configure. And that's Ether 1. But I think I have to say Ethernet. Ether 1. Now, the question is, it's IPv6. I need to do IPv6. No, address. I just do address. Okay. 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 All right. So let's do. All right. This gets a little interesting. So this is our prefix, which is a /48. So how do I do this?
You said /48, and I hadn't noticed it was an IPv6 address for a second, and I was very confused.
Yeah, this is v6.
Back to you.
No, you're quite all right. So each block in IPv6 is 16 bits. So FDDB, F808, 7418 are 48 bits. Then I can put in a subnet ID for in the next block of 16, and then the rest has to be the interface ID. So I'm going to do 1 here. So this is subnet 1. ::1. All right, so I'm going to put this router on the, well, I could do 0, but I don't like it. So I'm going to put it on a low numbered address in subnet 1. So this, like I said, this gets kind of wild, but it's, so this first 1 here on that command line is the is part of the last 16 bits of the network prefix. And then I have another 64 bits that are the interface ID, unless you're doing point-to-point links, which is what I do with the other routers. So this should be a valid address, and it is, and this would be a /64. Okay. Here comes the interesting part. I should just be able to do a set service router advertisement. Okay. Let's see if it'll let me do that. Set service router advert interface. Now what do you want here? It just wants the interface name. Okay. And so in this case, that's Ether 1. Okay. Let's commit that. So it becomes actually active. And as before, this is going to take a while just because I think the back end in our virtualization infrastructure is kind of busy. Now it gets interesting. So let's take a look. Which one do I have? I have this guy here. It has a link local address, but it doesn't have a global address. I do not know why offhand. That is not what was supposed to happen. This is why we do this. Let's see if this guy's doing any better. what did you do? It gave itself a link local, but not a global address. That is quite strange. That is quite strange. That is not the way this is supposed to work. So let's see. Oh, there it is. I was going to say. So this actually grabs traffic. Let's make sure that actually works. So let's do that ping again. We should see that. Let's do a couple of these. Oh, there we go. And we saw the pings. Okay, cool. But I do not see router advertisements. So I'm missing something. Not surprising, because I hadn't actually looked into that. It was just kind of at a whim. I'm wondering if I have to set something else. Let's see if I can spot that offhand. Otherwise, I need to do a bit more research. No, I don't want to. It should just advertise itself. Enabling advertisements. Okay. I wonder if I need to actually actively tell it the prefix. Interesting. Let's try that and see if that does something. It's clearly not sending router advertisements. So we'll try that, and if that doesn't work, I'll do a bit more research off stream, and we'll do this next week. All right, so let's try that. Ether1 prefix, and the prefix I want to do is /64. Okay, and I need to commit it. Now we'll take a quick look at it. Once it actually does something. Make sure it actually registered that correctly. Okay. Let's see if that does something different. I mean, make sure is that the right IP term? Yes, it is. Let's see. Yes. Look at that. So it's kind of hard to spot in all this mess. There it is. That's our prefix. It created a global IPv6 address from the prefix. So that's what it was. And there are the router advertisements. Very cool. I like it. That's interesting, though. I figured it would. By default just advertise the prefix it knows about because it knows its own address, but it didn't. Now I'm curious if this dinky little virtual PC actually did anything with that. Let's see. Yep, it worked as well. There it goes. It gave itself a routable address. It is old school though. It did give itself an address that is tied to its MAC address, which is not the current standard anymore. All right. Oh, ODG. Y3 technically, yes. If an interface, I don't know that VyOS or JWST has a concept of bringing interface down. Normally when an interface becomes active, because you physically plug the cable in, or in a simulation you created a connection, the router advertisements are automatic when the router sees the either virtual or real Ethernet Ethernet activation. Router advertisements are supposed to be automatic. In this operating system, it doesn't. It didn't because of the way the operating system is written. It knew it was supposed to advertise, but it didn't know what to advertise, which is kind of silly. It should default to the network the router itself is connected on, but it makes sense to have other options. So I had to actually tell it what to advertise, and once I did, it did that just fine. So these devices picked up automatic address, and ODG. That's why I do this on stream. It's I know you guys get a kick out of it when stuff doesn't work and we figure it out, and hopefully my students will get some sense of the fact that I'm not just all knowing, because I just as soon have them understand that tinkering with stuff is what they should be doing, because nobody can remember or know all this stuff. I know what I'm going for. I know what my goal is. I know what kinds of things should be there, but every operating system is different. And I think that's. I always think about it. I've taught various lab classes, and of course, what I'm teaching now is a graduate class, is a bit different. But I teach a class at the intro level, and there everything is tightly scripted, and so it's mostly if there's a problem, the student just didn't read the instructions. And for that class, it makes sense because this is the first time they've ever done anything like that. Now, when an error happens, it's an opportunity for me to teach, but I don't try to have that happen on purpose, because at that level, I don't want that level of frustration when it's the first time they've ever used a command line on anything, right? On the other hand, we teach a fourth year. In the U.S. it's called senior level class, There, the point we make to the students, ODG, is exactly what the point you just made. We give you enough information that you can figure it out, but you will most likely get it wrong a few times. And this is just as much about figuring out why it was wrong, how to fix it, as it is about getting it right the first time. The point is you've got to get it right at the end of your assignment. But how you got there is really a lot of the process we go through. So, very, very, very valid point. And that's, and it is so hard to teach. It is so hard to teach troubleshooting. And ODG, that's sort of the closest I've ever gotten, is that class, because it's, those students have enough other classes that they've taken ahead of that one, that they have the basic knowledge of the networks. By three of it, just those aha moments of figuring it out yourself, and when something went wrong, and you figured it out and you fixed it. That's when you really learn. Even at the intro class, I've fortunately had a few students that went through that where it was more that they just couldn't understand. So I wasn't, forcing them to really struggle through like what I just did here with commands. But they still had to sort of figure out, what information they had to put into the different commands. And I remember one of the students I was working with this particular student, and when they, I could literally see it. I mean, we were going through, why that, how to sort of think about the network and how to configure it, and I could just, it's basically, I could see. I can see that change in body language and expression. I said, "Oh, I get it," and yeah, student had it perfect after that, and that's really cool when that happens. In terms of things, teaching how to debug, fix things. I'm infamous. This is decades ago. One of the first labs I ever taught. One of the labs. Basically, I had them, and this is back in the telephony days. They wired up a telephone to a telephone switch, and I had made a wiring mistake. I put in a wiring mistake on purpose, and so when they wired it up, it wasn't going to work until they found my mistake and fixed it. And I'm still infamous among the students that are still around from those years. For that one, they absolutely, they absolutely hated it, but then they thought it was really cool when they figured it out. ODG, being able to solve issues is definitely one of the most important skills in most of life, certainly in IT, but also in all sorts of other traits of life. Absolutely. And so, what we do two things in this advanced class. So one of them is, the students have enough information that if they're really, really diligent, everything will work. But it never does. You've seen me do this, right? It never does. You make a mistake somewhere along the way. You forget to put something in. You're configuring 6 different devices and you get something wrong somewhere. I don't have to miswire something on purpose. It'll just happen. But then the whole point is that we're not going to just point at it and say, hey, unless they, unfortunately in our current setup, this is much less likely to happen. When I first taught the class, it was possible for a student to make a mistake that actually broke everybody else's setup as well. Oof. That I had to fix right away. But if I can see that that wasn't the case, I just sit back and wait and let them work on it for a while, and maybe give them a hint if I saw that they were just kind of spinning the wheels. But yeah, that's the closest I can get in that environment. And then, and again, this is kind of brutal in some ways, but a portion of their final exam involved walking into the lab, and I basically hand them a piece of paper and say, with the setup that you're familiar with, same computer, same wiring, same everything. Build this network in the next 30 minutes and show me that it works. You can't ask questions. I'm not going to help you. You have 30 minutes. Show me that it works. And, I've seen some really good students totally fall apart and not be able to get to step one. It just make a mistake somewhere, mistype something, cannot get themselves out of a hole. But it's, I have to do that, right? Because when they're on the job, I mean, I basically tell them this is the last time you can screw up a big network and not get fired over it. So, I have to do something that at least gives them a sense of, how do I actually, how do I react to this stuff under pressure? And I can't create pressure other than saying this is part of your exam. If you don't get it done, you don't get the points. And that generates enough pressure that it simulates what happens when the network doesn't work and the VPs already come down to the data center twice and going, when is it going to be fixed? That is pressure, right? And so it's really hard to simulate, but that's that's as close as I'm able to get. All right. Well, I did make it all the way to the normal end of our stream, so I feel pretty good about that. And so I will. So I will at this point do our usual shoutouts. Thank everyone who's stuck with us for being here in the stream. If you were here live and you haven't done so already, I'd love for you to hit that follow button. And hope you enjoyed the stream. If you're watching the VOD on Twitch, same thing. If you think this is kind of an interesting place to be, please hit the follow button. You'll find out when we go live, which should normally be every Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern. And if you're watching this, pretty consistent about that. And if you're watching this on YouTube, and this will be up on YouTube. So, hi YouTube. When you're watching this, I'd love for you to hit the thumbs up button. If you're so inclined, hit the subscribe button, because YouTube will let you know when we put up more content there. So with that, again, I hope that everyone has an ODG. You're very welcome. So everybody have a wonderful rest of your night, morning, afternoon, evening, whatever the case may be for you. And hopefully we'll see you here again next week. Have a good one, everyone.